Right, here's where we start for you on all angles at 12 o'clock. Of course, we continue with the big story since yesterday morning. Police are continuing with their investigations into the downtown Joburg blaze that claimed over 70 lives. At the time, or rather the same time, people continue searching for loved ones, unsure if they made it out alive. Let's go straight back to those streets where we find our reporters Pule Letshwiti-Jones and Bafedile Moerane. They are on the ground just looking at the story as it unfolds to give us updates. Bafedile, I think I'll start with you in terms of, or rather Pule, let me start with you because you are the one who has the latest details in terms of a faith-based organization prayer that is going to take place where you are.
Definitely, we did see some of the, members of the Gauteng's faith-based organization. They were told by law enforcement to actually, come in a different route because this area here is cordoned off, as you can see right now. There's high police presence here, members of JMPD, members of SAPS and private security as well. They are patrolling around this building to ensure that nobody goes back inside. While there was an incident of some of those who were residing here who wanted to go back inside. We spoke to the Department of Social Development, national and provincial, in the morning. The minister said that they were doing all they can to help those affected victims in terms of counseling and other challenges they were incurring. But we also now understand that next to that, the faith-based organization and community has called for unity to say that despite documented, undocumented, South African, not South African, there should be unity to ensure that, we can overcome this situation. They've also slammed at the political organization, saying that this is not the time to be blaming NGOs or NGOs blaming political parties, but this is a time for unity and cooperation and ensuring that there can be a step in the right direction in terms of addressing the situation and, of course, assisting the affected victims. So that prayer service is expected to take place in a couple of minutes from now, where it will be for the affected victims of the families of the 74 people who died when this building was gutted by fire.
All right, let's go to Heidi Giokos very quickly. She also actually joins us from the CBD there. Heidi, I understand that you have visuals and I can see them now already. Forensics there, obviously going to continue to, comb that building, and we might, hear from them that there's been more that they are finding, Heidi. I think that's the fear.
Yes, certainly, Masego, and these visuals are coming to you live from just outside the building that was gutted in the early hours of yesterday morning. We did indicate earlier on that canine units had moved in. We saw the sniffer dogs, about a number of them actually moving in and going through the entire building, and soon after that we also saw firefighters moving in, and we've just had to move as the media to allow for forensics and the pathology officials to actually come in and do their work. At this particular stage, we're not exactly sure what has been found, whether or not it is actual bodies that have been recovered or body parts. We have been given an indication that it might be body parts at this particular point. You must remember that there were 10 bodies that were burnt beyond recognition. So there's a high possibility that during this fire, when there was recovery that was happening, there might have been an instance where a full body might have not been recovered because of the extent of the fire. So it still remains a very delicate scene, and just before 12 o'clock we did speak to emergency services spokesperson Mr. Robert Molauti, who did indicate that they are still going through the scene. It is still a scene where they have to make sure that absolutely everything is cleared up, and then they'll officially hand it back to the South African Police Service. So there's still a lot going on here, and you can imagine why. Because this building is a 5-story building, it became an informal settlement. It was a hijacked building. There were many, many people living in here. It was obviously over-occupied and over-capacitated. And we do know that there were just too many people in here. Over 70 people have since died in this fire. So I think pathology is just, and forensics are obviously just getting ready. It's interesting that they've driven all the way down there, so it might be that part of the building where there might have been some sort of identification of either a body or body parts, Masego.
Heidi, I think I still need to just stay on your picture as well, but I'll come back to you as those forensics are still busy combing that scene. Obviously, eventually they'll get into that 5-story building. In the meantime, Heidi, let's bring in Bafedile. Bafedile was actually at a media briefing by the Gauteng Health Department in terms of the identification of bodies. Bafedile, very sad to hear that most of the bodies there are actually now charred remains, and families probably won't be able to claim their people just yet.
That might really take a very long time. It might be a long process, but we've had the department having to say that they have roped in a number of the stakeholders, including the Department of Home Affairs, as part of the identification process. They are also going to do the DNA, which will then be sent to various laboratories. Then when the results comes, that's when probably the process will actually be done. But for clarity, in relation to those numbers that have actually changed, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Modiba, who's the head of communication at the Department of Health here in Gauteng. Modiba, thank you so much for joining us. We're hearing news and numbers today, 62 unidentifiable, and only 12 can be recognized. Can you clarify that for us?
Thank you for this opportunity. So essentially what this means is that the forensic pathology team has done their work in terms of the bodies that were taken to our mortuaries. You'll recall that yesterday when the update was being given, we said that there's about 74 bodies at our forensic pathology services and also 4 body parts. So at that time, we were sure that there were 10 bodies that were unrecognizable, meaning that it's a full body, but the nature of the burns are such that we cannot tell who this person is. Even if the family were to come, there's no other way of them being able to identify that particular body. So having gone through all of the bodies, they then obviously, the update that has been given now is that out of those, it's no longer just 10, it's actually 62 bodies, 62 bodies that are unidentifiable, and only 12 are identifiable. Now, obviously, that then means that it will then delay the process of families being able to, be informed properly, because now the DNA process must kick in, because if we cannot identify, for us not to issue a wrong body to the wrong family, we need to allow the current process of DNA to unfold, which the SAPS is actually assisting with. They are managing that particular process, and we're hoping that the process will be able to go as speedily as possible. We do understand the anxiety from families who want to know the status of their loved ones, and that is why today here at Diepkloof, tomorrow and even on over the weekend, there will be teams that are here to allow those families to be able to come through. They're not just coming through for that process of identification, but they're also coming through so that they can be taken through a counseling process, to be provided with spiritual support, to be taken through, because this is a traumatic process for many of the families, to have to reckon with the fact that their loved ones would have passed away in such a tragic manner. So it's important that there is some kind of counseling process that unfolds in the midst of all the other processes that must unfold, and hence we are also talking to the families to advise them that it will take a bit of time. They need to obviously be a bit patient, but it's important that we get the details. So when they are here, we are taking down their details, recording them, so that we are then able to be in touch with them. But most importantly, when we've concluded the DNA process, even when the families are here, we're taking samples from them so that we can match the DNA that has been done at the Forensic Pathology Services by the SAPS together with the samples that have been taken from the families. It is a process that requires that it's being handled with care, given that we are dealing with grieving families, and also the issue of different communities. You have some who are of the Muslim faith, and you know that with the Muslim faith, they've got a particular time frame within which they need to bury the loved ones. That's why we've got the body that represents the Muslim communities in the particular area, that they are here together with different societies or funeral undertakers that assist them to be able to go through that process together. We have briefed them as well, so they understand that it will take some time in terms of processing the bodies. Then they can also help to communicate with the members, because it's important that we don't issue a wrong body to a wrong family.
Okay, so Ramutiba, just in short, what is going to happen with those, the foreigners in particular, and also that the families here in South Africa cannot really bring the proof of identification? What's going to happen in that process, because their things have bent yesterday?
If you can't bring the proof of identification and so forth, the DNA process becomes quite critical, because it becomes conclusive if we go through that particular process. Hence, we are not leaving this to chance. Yes, there is a requirement in terms of proof of identification and so forth, and the embassies are there as well to be able to assist with issuing some of those papers. We have arranged with our sister department, Home Affairs. They will be operating from here to be able to also assist, and they will provide further information when they are here, as they are assisting families to be able to know what they can do going forward. But I think government is doing everything possible to assist the families. Hence, the DNA process that is currently unfolding, which also will be able to assist us beyond the issues of your normal proof of identifications.
Well, thank you so much. That's Mr. Modiba is the head of communication at the Department of Health here in Gauteng. Masiho, having to sum up and explain further as to how the process will unfold. It seems like it's going to be a very long journey for the families to finally get their loved ones to be buried at their respective place. But earlier on, we engaged with one Malawian nation who is saying that he has lost more than 5 relatives. He was part of the people who were converging here to identify their loved ones, but he's saying that they are not actually going to repatriate. They will definitely be forced to bury their loved ones here, because they have been trying to engage also with their embassy, and there's no positive response from them. So Maseho, quite a long journey for these families, a frustrating one at the same time.
All right, yeah, it's going to be quite sad there, Bafedile, in terms of those families. And a lot of them, of course, repatriation, they have to probably opt to bury here in South Africa because of the costs. All right, let's take you back to Pule Letshwiti-Jones, who just will give us an update as well, Pule, in terms of some of the people that you spoke to earlier. What are they saying? Just more than 24 hours now since it happened. It seems we aren't able to speak to Pule properly at the moment. I don't know if we've got Heidi Giokos still on the line. She was giving us visuals of those pathology officers, rather, who had just arrived at the Joburg CBD. And I wonder if she has an update in the few minutes that we spoke to Bafedile, and she was speaking to Modiba of the Gauteng Health Department. Whether or not, Heidi, if you were there, if you have an update for us in terms of those pathologists and what they're doing now.
Yes, Maseko, interestingly enough, the pathology van has left that particular area where we were showing you earlier on, but the pathologists seem to still be here. So there seems to be, I can spot about 3 of them. So it does seem as though they are still in the area. I'm not sure if they've gone to collect another van or whatever the case might be. Perhaps they're just waiting for the go-ahead. But that is a clear indication of the possibility of there either being bodies that were not recovered or body remains. Listening to my colleague Bafedile engaging with the health department, the extent of the burns, speaks to the extent of the fire and the high probability of there still being bodies that might have not been recovered, but more so body parts that might have not been recovered because of the extent of the fire and the burns that sadly these individuals suffered throughout this massive fire. For now, it doesn't seem as though there is much movement, but that's also why, Masego, I would say they are not allowing people into the building, because it still remains some kind of active crime scene. I am seeing some sort of movement where Pule is. I do know that there is a prayer service, Masego, so maybe we should just hand it back to you to see what's happening where Pule is.
All right, Heidi, Giokos, with those visuals that you're seeing of that building, what remains of it really after it caught fire yesterday in the morning around 1:30, according to the residents and those who are around there. Pule, let me come to you. I think you can hear us now. Just give us visuals and an update on that prayer that is happening there. All right, it doesn't look like we are able to connect properly to Pule Letshwiti-Jones. He gave us an update earlier, in fact, that there is going to be a prayer service by different faith-based organizations that have actually gone to the Johannesburg CBD there outside that particular building to pray for the lives of those who are gone and, of course, those who still remain and the trauma that they might be going through. He also spoke to some residents of that particular building who are insisting that they want to go back inside to try and see if they can salvage or still salvage some of their belongings. Most of them telling Pule that they see which part of the building is mostly damaged, and according to where they stay in the building, they think they can still get their belongings. But of course, they're not allowed to at the moment because the building is not safe. There could be structural damages from inside the building that also occur after the fire.